Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks. I am your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is my co-host, the Juice, Dave Sadler. We have a jam-packed show coming for you. We're going to answer fan Q&A and some of the questions we're going to pick a couple prize winners for as well. Got to recap Bellator 136, World Series of Fighting 20, UFC Fight Night 64, and we're going to pick the main card fights for UFC on Fox 15, which I will be live and in person at in Newark, New Jersey at the Prudential Center this Saturday, as I mentioned, on Fox Broadcast Television. He is the Juice, Dave Sadler. And how's it going, Dave?
I'm doing good, Jim. I just want to show everybody my shirt. That's right. Playoff hockey starts tonight, Jim. How about that? Getting excited up there in the D?
Yes, the Red Wings for the, I believe, 24th consecutive season have made the playoffs. So,
yeah, I don't know. Did you notice my shirt, Jim? I'm trying to show it. It's nice. It's Nicholas Backstrom.
Nice. And it's on the back.
Yeah, it's signed too.
Then why are you wearing it?
Don't mind your business.
AJ Hiller, if he's watching right now, he's going to go, shame on Dave. You should know better.
No, he signed it. He signed it for me outside of their practice facility, and it's in a magic marker, and you can tell it's there, but it's not like it's. I don't know. It's cool. I only wear it like 2 days a year, so
okay.
But it works for this. So getting ready for your trip. I'm sure you're pretty excited. Not to. What's the word I'm looking for here? Not to rain on your parade, but how's that? See how that Chicago card's starting to look? Looking pretty good, huh?
Yeah, we kind of already knew one of the matchups that was going to be there, but the overall card the whole card hasn't been announced, but 3 of the 4 fights for the presumed main card have been announced. The Dillashaw Brow 2, which of course was supposed to take place next weekend, has been moved as the main event for that Fox card in Chicago. We're also going to see Jessica Ai against Miesha Tate. The matchup had been announced, just where it was going to take place hadn't. And my mind is escaping me on the other one. Anthony Pettis and Miles Jury.
Yep.
So I'm assuming one more fight will be added to the main card portion, and then the undercard will fill out. But we know a lot of guys in the Chicago area will probably be added to that card. Dave, our good friend Eddie Winelands, you said was close to getting cleared to resume training. I gotta believe that's a possible destination. Darren Elkins, if Neil Magny makes quick work of his opponent there in Manila.
Darren Cruikshank.
Darren Cruikshank. Hopefully Darren gets another fight in before that. Just as we know how he likes to work, he might get a fight here in May and then fight in July. He's a possibility for that card.
What was the fight that they were rumoring last week? Kat against Sarah McMahon.
That would be a good one.
That'd be a good one. Just to keep all the girls kind of on that same schedule.
And then good. I know, he does still do a lot of trading in Indiana, but I know he also spends a lot of time with the Black Zillions. But Matt Mitrione's a guy that could get added to that card.
Yep.
I know Felice Herrig's fighting now, but you got to believe that she, win or lose, could be ready for a fight in Chicago, which is, that's where she trains just outside of. So she could be added to that card.
Yeah, she could win coming up and then take about 2 weeks off and bam, get right back in there.
Now, remember, I had kind of mentioned it previously that Chicago would be a great place for Joanna Jezkaderic to defend her title. Now with them adding a title fight as the main event, I highly doubt they would do 2 title fights on free TV. So that kind of leaves that whoever fights her kind of in limbo. I'm not really sure where they're going to put that one now.
Yeah, we're lucky to get one. It's been a while. It's been a while, hasn't it? On Fox?
Yeah. It's been a while on a Fox. The last wasn't that Henderson and Diaz, or was there a Mighty Mouse?
The last one was in Chicago. It was Mighty Mouse. I'm thinking.
Okay, was that the Mighty Mouse Moraga?
Mighty Mouse Dodson, I think.
Okay, and that was the last free title fight.
I believe so. As they say in the radio business, Jim, I'm efforting that as we speak.
All right. Well, yeah, regardless, looks like a really good card coming to Chicago in July. I know Dave was going to be there regardless of what was going on. I'm still up in there. Of course, I have this trip to New Jersey coming up. There's a big event in my neck of the woods coming up in May called Motor City Comic-Con that I'm very excited for this year. So there's that. And I also kind of was thinking about maybe going to that Nashville card, which is the day after my birthday. So
A couple of days before my birthday.
Yeah, so I'm like, I'm rumoring on a couple of different things. So we'll see, because tickets don't go on sale for this fight until like Memorial Day weekend, around that area. So I got some time to think about it. But
Jim, I went back and looked. This event took place at the Sleep Train Arena. Johnson versus Benavidez 2. December 2013 is when the last time the belt was defended on free TV.
Okay, and that's when Mighty Mouse knocked him out.
Correct.
Okay, and that was in Sacramento, right? That's the Sleep Train Arena?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's
formerly known as the Arco Arena.
Correct. It'll be about a year and a half since it's been defended on free TV. Got some good cards in there before then, but needless to say, title shots in Chicago.
All right. Well, as we said, we're going to start the show with our fan Q&A. For those of you who don't like our Facebook page, go do it right now. Facebook.com/BeyondTheCage podcast. Yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't. And on our Facebook page, this past week, we were running a contest for some free prizes. The 3 prize packs are as follows. I'm going to have a signed photo for UFC fighter Paige Van Zandt, who's fighting this weekend. And then I also have a couple of mystery packs, which will include an autograph photo card from Jamie Varner and last weekend's main event fighter, Ricardo Lamas. So those will kind of be randomly assigned to 3 winners that we have selected. And to enter, you had to write a MMA-related question on our Facebook page. And I think we got something like, we got quite a few questions. I'll put it that way, to go through. And we're going to read them all, answer them all, and at the end, we're going to pick our favorite 3 questions, and those people will be notified on our Facebook page, and they have 24 hours to respond, and if they don't respond within that 24 hours, we will pick somebody else. So stay tuned there, and
so if you don't get
win
picked,
some prizes.
If you don't get picked, cross your fingers.
Right. Okay, well, let's start. Let's see. Our first question here comes from Kyle F. And I think Dave has that question. Nope, I got it. Here it is. There it is. All right.
All right.
It's a 2-part question for us. His first part says, who do you think would have the best chance of beating Ronda Rousey, seeing as she has defended herself and her title on multiple times, and the only people in the future I can see challenging her would be Jessica Ai, Holly Holm, and Cyborg, possibly Zingano again. Out of that, and then secondly, what do you think about Anderson Silva's suspension? Is it too serious? And obviously, he mentioned, he was injured prior to the Diaz fight. Well, looking on the Rousey thing, I'll go here real quick, Dave, before you give your answer. I think Zingano can do better than 14 seconds. I think that's apparent. I also think Sarah McMahon can do better than her minute and a half. I think those two. As of right now, I don't think Holly Holm has a chance. Jessica Ai's interesting. I think she'll kind of get a little taste of a more grappling-based fighter here with Miesha Tate. If she can get by Miesha with relative ease, I think she can be a legitimate threat. And Cyborg, obviously, if that was fought at 145, Dave, I think Cyborg would honestly beat Ronda Rousey. But at 135 pounds, considering Cyborg's never done it before, I don't think she could do it. I don't think she could beat her. I think the weight cut would be too drastic. She would lose a lot of her power and explosiveness. And just Ronda Rousey's overall superior technique, I think, would go in on that.
Yeah. Whoa. That was weird.
You okay there?
Yeah, I was trying to, while you were finishing talking, I was trying to post a link on Facebook, but when I clicked the link, it was playing what you just said, and I was like, "Hey, you already said that." So no, I don't think that at 135 pounds, I don't think it's much of a fight with Cyborg. I would like to see Jessica Eye run through somebody, dominate Miesha Tate from start to finish and kind of earn that number one contender spot. Like you said, McMahon, Zingano, I think they can do better than that. I really think it comes down to this. Me personally, I think Zingano is one of the top two in the division outside of Rousey. It's her and somebody else probably are the top two. But right now, Rousey is so good. She is like 1, and everybody else is like 2, 2A. You know, like there's a huge difference, and people are just trying whatever they can to have a shot at it. And I think it's going to come down to this. Is somebody going to beat Ronda? No, I don't think so. Not anytime soon. I think it's a matter of once she leaves, that opens up that division, and that division becomes way more entertaining. I don't think Ronda sticks around a whole lot longer. Dude, she can make so much money making movies. So, yeah, that's what I think there. And then did you already give your thoughts on Anderson, or you want me to?
You can go ahead on that, and then I will chime in.
In the question, Kyle said something to the effect of, what do you think about the Anderson Silva suspension? Too serious? No, it's not too serious. It might not even be enough. And then he says, keep in mind the injury that he had prior to the Diaz fight. I'm going to go back to what I had in an argument with somebody at my work. Juliana Pena destroyed everything inside of her knee. ACL, PCL, MCL, groin tears, everything. And she didn't pop on a P test. I realized that Anderson Silva broke his leg, but the rehab that Pena was going through had to be a lot more intensive and stuff like that. And she wasn't on any kind of performance-enhancing drugs. So I think the injury has nothing to do with the fact that he was on the steroids. And he should be punished accordingly. And unfortunately, I think it definitely calls into account his legacy.
Well, I think because of injury is why he used them. Because steroids help you come over injuries quicker. Regardless, Dave, he used them.
Yeah.
That's the point. It doesn't matter whether he was injured or not, he used them. We could
Correct.
speculate as to why he used them, and my guess is he used them probably to help recover quicker on the injury, but regardless, he still used them. He got caught, and he's getting punished for it. Now, do I think it's a little severe considering he's a first-time offender? Normally, I would say yes, but he failed on 2 separate tests. And
Correct.
that, to me, is why the punishment is so severe, not the fact that he failed. Because there's been guys who have failed first time, have only gotten a couple of months, which in most cases, that's probably what he got. But when that second test came out, failed as well, kind of had no choice. And to be honest, I don't think he should be fighting again anyway. And to me, this is almost kind of a sign as like, all right, you're already 40 years old. You're going to have to sit out another 18 months. You barely beat a guy who fights at 170. Do you really think you're going to have that much of a future left anyway? That's kind of, they're almost kind of forcing him to retire. Now, I know it's in the comments. He's like, oh, I'm going to come back. And I just don't see it, Dave. I didn't think he looked that great in the Diaz fight off, or what, a 13-month layoff. How do you think he's going to look, after an 18-month layoff and being then almost 42? It's just, it's his time to hang him up. There's nothing left for him to prove, regardless whether his legacy is charged or whatever, and by that time, Dave, by the time, that suspension is officially up, and whether he's either declared retirement before or after that, he's still going to go down. He's still going to be in the UFC Hall of Fame. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, he's definitely going to be in the Hall of Fame, but look at him. Since he's off the roids, look at him now.
Right.
Hey, before we get to the next question, I know that we're going to talk about the polling card coming up in a little bit. We're going to recap it. Somebody that's got a special birthday is actually going to call in real quick. Do you know who has a special birthday today?
I believe so.
Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I have an idea.
Who is it?
That's Mr. Steve Sadler.
From Vigilante. It's not his actual birthday. I believe it's more of Vigilante MMA's birthday. But speaking of which, hold on a second. I think he needs to get something off of his chest. Steve, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Can you hear him, Jim?
Yeah, I don't know if our listeners can, but we hope they can.
Steve, I can hear you. So, happy birthday, first of all.
Can Jim hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay. Sound like he was whispering. I didn't know if he had a sore throat.
No. So, you texted me a couple minutes ago, and you said you had something you wanted to get off your chest.
Yeah. I'm going into a meeting here, so I don't have too long, but I just had to say this. I was on social media. I saw your Facebook page, Beyond the Cage podcast Facebook page. Is that your page?
That's mine.
Okay, with the banner now. I'm looking at the banner on your page. Who came up with this banner?
I made it.
Like cartoon images? What is that?
I don't know. I thought it was something different.
Just don't comment. Just tell me the answer to the question.
I said I made it, Steve. I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, hold on. Jim said he made it, Steve.
Why can't I hear Jim?
Say it again, Jim.
Yeah, I made the banner, Steve.
Okay. I don't understand what's going on with your studio, but I can't even hear him. Here's the deal. Pretty cool. I'll give you that. They're cartoon images. Everybody needs to go to this Facebook page and look at this, okay? Cartoon images. You got Jim and Dave. What do you call these, like avatars? Is that what they are?
Yeah.
Sure. I don't know. I found an app on my iPhone to make them.
Is that the lingo? Here's the deal. Jim looks like a young, handsome John Hamm with glasses.
I tried.
And Dave looks like, remember when David Beckham shaved his head? Back then, yeah, Dave looks like David Beckham or something. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, you guys don't look like that. Why are they so, these guys, if anybody just happened to scan across the internet and they're looking at your Facebook page, they would think that you guys belong in a boy band. Jim would be like the good looking nerdy guy who all the studious chicks would like, and then Dave would be like the bad boy, like the Donnie Wahlberg of the group, who all the chicks really loved, and they screamed because their parents didn't like him. They thought he was too rough, because he had a shaved head and a goatee. Okay, well, you guys don't look like that. What is going on?
That can't be why you called in. That was driving you that crazy?
No, that's why I called in. I'm sitting right now outside the finest restaurant in Hollywood, California right now, waiting to go in for an early lunch.
Oh, I thought he was about to say Hollywood, Florida for a second.
That's the reason.
Got it.
Are you sure it's not Hollywood, Florida, Steve?
Listen, young, handsome John Hamm with glasses. There's any lips coming from you guys.
So that was totally un-MMA related.
All right. Well, can we transition from that?
Yeah, this isn't MMA related. This is about your show, though.
All right. Well, we appreciate it, and happy birthday to Vigilante MMA.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. So you got anything else? Because we got to move on to more questions to answer for our fans.
No, go for it. I hope I didn't bump Chuck Liddell or anybody by just calling it out of the blue.
No, it's all good. I appreciate it, and maybe we'll make a new banner. Appreciate it. Later. Well, that wasn't how I thought that was going to go.
All right. Well, that kind of threw me on that. I'm going to be honest with you.
Hey, so now it's the Beyond the Cage podcast with John Hamm.
I don't know. I think it looks kind of like us. I mean, it's a little app that has like a limited options. It's not like, I'm creating a video game or something on there. I mean, it's a free app I got on my iPhone,
Hey, now that he brings it up, your hair looks amazing in that photo. I never noticed it.
Well, I'm wearing the hat today, but normally, I comb it over to the side, and that was the only one where it kind of showed kind of a comb over there to the side.
Hey, between me and you, he's not going out to he's going out to an early bird dinner because he's a senior citizen. So anyway, sorry about that, but hey, he called.
All right.
So
well, that was going back to our question. Kyle F had the first question there, so thanks for the question there, Kyle. We'll move on to our next question here. Raul C, and he writes in, after Rousey and Correa, and Rousey wins again, do you think a fight between Tate and Holm is inevitable to determine a true number one contender? Or do you think the UFC will not risk losing two viable contenders like the Gustafsson-Cormier situation last year? Well, I think Raul is forgetting that Jessica Ai is fighting Miesha Tate first. And I think if Jessica Ai wins, she's getting a shot at the title. That's for certain. If Miesha Tate wins, I don't think the same can be said because she's already fought Ronda twice and lost twice. So I don't know how quickly the UFC wants to book Ronda Tate 3. Now, honestly, Holly Holm did not impress me against Pennington. In fact, that fight probably could have won as a draw. A very close fight. I think Holly Holm needs to fight maybe someone like Amanda Nunes, somebody like that. And if she can get by her, then maybe fight Miesha Tate if Miesha Tate can, in fact, beat Jessica Ai. Maybe that's how Tate Holm happens. But I don't think Tate Holm's happening anytime soon. That might not happen until next year, depending on how things go. Because if Holm gets another fight this year, which she should, and wins, and then again, in this scenario, let's say Tate loses, are you really going to match up Tate on a loss against Holm on a 2-fight winning streak, who is then poised with one more fight to get a shot at the title? Probably not.
Yeah, I'm in 100% agreement with you about Holm. I don't think that she's anywhere close to being ready to be number one contender. She looked very impressive in every fight except for her UFC fight. So I don't know how they get to that fight. That fight may happen, but I think it's going to happen on some weird circumstances, like Tate loses and then Holm wins a fight and Tate's looking to get back in there. Tate and Holm fighting for a chance to fight Ronda, I don't think happens for a long, long time.
Yeah, I think, like I said, some pieces have to change, but as of right now, I don't see that happening because I think Holm's getting somebody else in the meantime because Tate's fighting Jessica Ai. If Tate wasn't scheduled to fight Jessica Ai, that's a maybe more likely matchup. With her being, on to 2-fight winning streak, herself being Miesha. So, but yeah, we'll have to wait on that. But thanks for writing in, Raul. He always comments on our contests. Been listening for a while. So, our next question comes from Thomas B, and he writes in: will the UFC's deal with Reebok be a boom or a bust? This is an interesting question because I'm going to answer it in 2 parts. I think initially, I think it's going to be a good thing. I think all the gear and stuff they can produce on a larger level will help. It'll get the UFC merchandise in stores that normally it hasn't been, like your Dick's Sporting Goods or, in stores like that where they already sell Reebok. It'll be really easy to sneak in UFC gear, which you don't really see UFC gear in stores, Dave. No. Not really. So I think it will help initially. But in terms of, spreading the UFC name places. But I don't know if it will be, I think it will be a boom that way for merchandise, but I don't know if it will be a boom in terms of fighter pay. That is yet to be seen. A couple of the fighters that we've talked to, at least, some of the lower level guys, the guys that are, sitting outside the top 15, it's not going to really change their pay. And in fact, it may even be a little lesser because it will limit their fight night sponsorships. Now, of course, we talked about, sponsoring different ways they can still get sponsorships, but obviously the sponsorships they get will probably have to be less money because it won't be an in-cage type of thing. That still doesn't mean they can't get sponsors, but they may have to get more sponsors to make up that same amount of money that they had previously. That's my guess. So that may change things. I think the guys in the top, they're going to get paid well anyway, and they're going to get paid well for this. So I don't think that's really going to affect the guys at the top too much. So that's the only thing that's going to be interesting to see. So I think that part might be a bust, but the merchandise thing I think will be a boom. To answer your question there, Thomas.
Yeah, funny how a couple months changes things. Remember when this was like the death of the UFC? Like everybody was like, "Oh my God, this is going to be awful," and 2 months later, no one's talking about it. That's why I like this question when I saw it come in. The Reebok deal is going to be good, like you said, from a merchandising standpoint. If I gave you a $50 debit card to go out and find a UFC shirt, where would you go right now?
I don't. Walmart sells MMA shirts, but it's not UFC.
It's like MMA Elite or something.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't. And I mean, you know, they want to get their logo on as much stuff as possible, and because of this deal, they're going to be able to do that, which is good for brand recognition. You know, brand recognition is where it's at. You know what this brand is, right? Just by looking at that,
right?
I mean, it's all about what you know. So, you know, the fighter thing is going to work itself out. I think that with this, if you're a guy that's right there, like our friend Neil Magny just got ranked 15th after winning like 48 fights in a row. He finally got ranked 15th. But if he can get back in there and get 2 wins this year, he could be top 8. That's a pay increase for him. You're going to see some guys that want to grab the bull by the horn and improve their ranking so that they can get paid instead of just kind of coasting, you know, like, oh, I'm good, I'm top 15 in the world. Well, you're going to see guys make those changes. So it'll be interesting. And after all the like the hate that people had for the deal, I think it's actually going to turn out pretty good.
Well, I guess, yeah, but I was just saying on my point, I was thinking if there's a part that I don't think the merchandising thing will bust. I'm just saying if there's a thing that will bust, you know, in his question, the boomer bust, that's the only thing I could think of really going wrong is, you know, a couple of years down the road, the fighters, you know, it doesn't work out the way it had hoped for, but we'll see.
Right.
I mean, it's a 7-year deal, so we shall see. All right. Thanks for the question, though. We'll move on to Joel R. And he puts in, who should be next on the Crow Cop revenge tour? Honestly, Crow Cop won. We'll talk about the fight. But I honestly think he should retire. I was a little surprised that he said he still wanted to continue fighting. But as far as who's next, I don't know. I heard Brendan Schaub may want to drop down to 205. That could be a fight. I think him against Mitrione would be a fun fight. You know, him against Mark Hunt, Old School Pride, would be fun. I think, you know, 2 old guys, him and Orlovsky, would be fun. And he lost to Roy Nelson, so maybe a rematch with Roy. And he lost to Frank Mir, so maybe a rematch with Frank. And those are all guys that most of those guys don't have a lot going on. So why not have him fight Crow Cop? You know, so those are some guys I think might be next for Crow Cop, and also they're guys that are not too top tier as well.
Yeah, I'm just gonna agree with you, Jim. To be completely honest, I mean, it can't be anybody who has any sort of title aspirations at all.
That's what I mean. It's not going to be Junior Dos Santos, and obviously he has trained with Stipe now a few times, so they're good friends. So he's not going to fight Stipe. He's not going to fight Kane. He's not going to fight Verdum. I don't think he's going to fight Travis Brown or Overeem. So that kind of leaves some of those lower tier guys that I mentioned.
Not to go on a tangent here, but doesn't Stipe have a fight coming up?
Yes, he is fighting Mark. Speaking of Hunt, he's fighting Mark Hunt in May in Australia.
Right. Thank you, Wikipedia. I found it just as you were speaking.
So, all right.
Cool.
Thanks for the question, Joel. We will go to Jacob M, and we kind of already answered this a little bit. His question was, who can beat Ronda Rousey? We kind of threw some names out there we think can compete. Zingano, Jessica I think Sarah McMahon can do better the second time around, and also Zingano can do better than 14 seconds. So those would be the people. We kind of said, if I don't think it will happen, Dave, but it ever somehow materialize at 145, Cyborg could probably be here, I think, at 145, but at 135, I don't think so. So I think those would be the people.
Yeah, I had to reset my Facebook. That was the question. Who was it from, Jim?
That was Jacob M.
All right. My Facebook is stupid. Sorry. Technical difficulties. The fun of doing a live show. Jacob M. Where are we at here? Golly.
Well, the question was, who can beat Ronda?
I still will go to my grave that it's Zingano. But, that's fanboy too. So, I think she can do it. I don't know. It's Zingano. To me, it's Zingano, Cyborg, and the movies. Those are the only thing.
All right. Then thanks for your question, Jacob. The next question comes from Joe H, and he says, "What happened to Sean Shirk?" And if you do a quick Google search, you'll find that Sean Shirk retired about 3 years ago. Last time I checked. So I don't know what he's doing, but he's not fighting MMA. I can tell you that much. And he's a guy that I think is a borderline UFC Hall of Famer. He did win the UFC lightweight title. He had fought for the welterweight title, despite being a severely undersized welterweight. But much like we talked about earlier with Anderson Silva, he at one point got stripped of his title due to steroids. And I don't know how much that will factor in. Obviously, it's been quite a few years since he retired. He's still not in, but there's still a lot of guys I would consider ahead of him as far as getting in the Hall of Fame there. But he's a guy that's a borderline Hall of Famer, I would say.
Sean Shirk, as of December 15th, 2014, says he wants in on the class action lawsuit against the UFC.
So there you go. But he is no longer fighting.
Yes. I wonder how that class action lawsuit's going. Haven't heard about that for a while either.
It sounds like a big whole mess that requires like a stack of papers this high.
It gives me a headache. It gives me a headache this big, Jim. This
right.
big.
And that's how big the stack of paper is.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for the question, though, Joe. We'll move on to Don A. And he writes in, which newcomer do you think has the brightest future in the UFC and why?
Can we classify new, like, when
that's
you
why
say,
I wasn't sure, like, how new are we talking? Because if we're talking strictly age, a guy that's fighting this weekend has a pretty bright future in Max Holloway, but he's been around the UFC like 7 fights now, but he's only like 23. Honestly, I guess you really wouldn't call a newcomer, but I guess because of his age 1 and 2, because he's been injured for a while. I think if he does make a comeback, I think Michael McDonald, he'll seem like a newcomer, Dave, when he finally comes back, and he'll still only be like 24 years old. I think he is a guy that still has a very bright future in MMA. But as far as like really new people, boy, I'm trying to think of like the past seasons here of the, I guess Juliana Pena, I think, has a bright future. I mean, she had that injury coming off, but I think she has a bright future. And how about she just beat, we'll talk about it, but she just beat Joanne Calderwood, this Marina Moroz.
Yeah.
First fight, 5-0. I would say she has a pretty bright future. She beat the number 6 fighter in the world in the first round. Those are some names that come to mind here as far as having a bright future.
Yeah, I'm going to go off the board, Jim, kind of like we're drafting. In the welterweight division, newly signed, Ben, I believe his last name is Nguyen, Nguyen. If you remember that video that was out there about the guy with the tattoos all over his face, remember that video? The 2 MMA guys?
Oh, yeah. That wasn't ONE FC, was it?
It was one of those over there. That's a guy that trains with our friend Brian Eversole. And now he's in the UFC. And yeah, he's a new guy. He's clearly got skills, and he's new. So there, that qualifies. Nah.
No, but yeah, that's yeah, those are some people I think we can do pretty well here.
Yeah.
But thanks for the question. That was a good question.
Yep.
All right. Brian H writes in, what is next for the winner of Page and Feliz? And if you were Joe Silva, who would have you tried to get to replace Yoel Romero for his fight against Jacare? Of course, as we know, we'll talk about it later. Chris Camuzzi got tabbed to replace Yoel Romero for Jacare's opponent at UFC on Fox 15. Tim Kennedy would have been a good guy to step in there. Someone had mentioned to me Derek Brunson. I think our friend, they were fighting on the Australia card, but either Sam Alvey or Dan Kelly, two middleweights. I think they were supposed to schedule May 9th, so a little ahead of time. But they talked about Bisping not being offered the fight and whatnot, and the whole reason to me Bisping didn't get the fight or wouldn't have got offered the fight is because UFC 186 has already lost a lot of star power and a lot of potential for that card. They weren't going to take another name off that card in Bisping to save this card, which already was pretty solid, regardless whether it had Jacare and Romero. And you wanted to keep Jacare on that card. Was Camuzzi the best option? Probably not, but he was a viable option, and on a week's notice, it's, you kind of don't want someone's title hopes dashed because they took a fight on a whim. Whereas Chris Camuzzi, even if he wins and pulls a big upset, he's not getting a title shot. It's not someone that's kind of risking their title hopes on taking a ill-advised short notice fight.
Right. Camuzzi got it because Camuzzi wanted it. And nobody else really stepped up to say, hey, I want the fight. Is it the fight that I would have booked? Absolutely not. It's what you have to do. It's what has to be done on 9 days' notice. Unfortunately, the card was shaping up to be awesome for the middleweight division. I mean, it's still going to be good, but it was shaping up to be awesome.
The only other thing I could have seen them maybe doing was having Camuzzi fight CB Dalloway and then having Jacare fight Bisping and moving him a week later to fight at 186. But I think they wanted to keep Jacare on that Fox card as the solid co-main event. But, he was already prepared to go to New Jersey, so I think that was the case. But I'm thinking that could have been a likely scenario as well. Move Jacare back 1 week.
Yeah.
But, all right. He also said what happens for the winner of Van Zandt and Herrig. Well, we won't pick the fight yet, but I think that the winner may get a title shot. I don't know. We're gonna have to see here. There's a lot of things that have to move into place, but I think the winner puts themselves in a very advantageous position to get a shot, just because of how high profile they're making this fight, Dave.
Yeah. Felice, I just saw an interview with one of my friends from CageFanatic.com, and they interviewed her at the Arnold. So what was that, 4 weeks ago? And they said in that interview, she said at the time Carla Esparza was still the champ, and they were like, well, if you win, you might have to fight Carla. And Felice feels like she's 2 fights away from the title, even if she were to win this fight. And I like that thought that she's 2 fights away because she thinks that she's not ready for the belt. Paige Van Zandt, as she did good in her fight, but let's see her with somebody with a different skill set, the whole 9 yards, somebody who's been around for a while, like Felice. Let's see how they both perform in this fight before we really decide what's next. Could it lead to a title shot? Absolutely. If I had to put money on it, I would say that it does not lead to a title shot.
And that's my thinking as well. It could, but I don't think it necessarily should. But thanks for the question there, Brian. All right. Kevin L writes in, will Cyborg and Rousey ever happen? And what do you think will be result? Well, as we said earlier, if it happens at 145, I think Cyborg wins. If it happens at 135, Rousey wins. And do I think it will ever happen? No. The reason I say that is because I don't think she can get down to 135. I really don't. And Ronda will never budge on moving up to 145, which I totally understand. So I don't think it'll happen. I honestly don't.
I don't think it happens either. There's money and everything. My son just walked in, and he's got a shirt that's with a mustache on it. It made me giggle. Sorry. Go. Go. Can't be on the show. I didn't invite you to the show. Jeez, kids.
Yeah, who do you think you are? Your Uncle Steve?
Yeah, what the heck? The heck? No, I don't think it'll happen. There's a lot of things, and there's a lot of things that need to happen, and getting to 135, like, there's too many little things, and the fight, I'm telling you, the fight doesn't intrigue me because Cyborg is just a huge woman who's just manhandling the other women that she's fighting, and I just haven't seen skills from Cyborg, and I don't think the fight would even be close if it went down. So.
All right, let's move on to our next question here, and that is from Brian R. And he writes in, regardless of what happens with the Aldo-McGregor matchup at UFC 189, what do you see as the future of the featherweight division? Both are presumed to be moving up, and I will believe that will happen as neither are making these cuts with ease. If that's the case, what does the division look like, and how long can that deep of a lightweight division give us the title fights we demand? Now, I think if Aldo beats McGregor, and I'm also presuming Frankie Edgar beats Uriah Faber, I think we will see Aldo Edgar too. Now, if he then beats Frankie Edgar for a second time, there may be another fight with McGregor. It depends how that fight goes down, but he'd have to win, I guess, 3 fights. We're looking at a possible rematch with McGregor, a rematch with Edgar. If he gets by those tests, I would say that's when he moves to 155. Reasonably. So for McGregor in this scenario here, he would have to fight somebody like a Chad Mendez, or I'm assuming maybe a Ricardo Lamas or a Dennis Bermudez or somebody like that somewhere in the meantime. Maybe he gets that one fight, he gets right back in. I'm not sure. But again, if he loses again, maybe that prompts up a move up to 155 as well. 2 losses. There's a lot of stuff kind of that goes on. It's hard to say that a guy has completely cleared out a division. But if you're looking for a right opportunity, I'm thinking that's what has to happen for Jose Aldo. I think he has to win a couple fights here because he at least has to fight Frankie a second time. I'll put it that way. I don't think the UFC allows him to vacate the title without fighting Frankie a second time if that matchup can materialize. So I would say no sooner than, let's see, could be 2017 before any of this happens for either gentleman. And by then, I don't know what the division looks like. It's really hard to speculate because I think a lot of the guys that are still tops at 155 are all in their late 20s and still will be relevant. Your Pettis, Dos Anjos, Jury, Bobby Green. The oldest guy I can really think of kind of still hanging around at 155 is like Josh Thompson, but he could be retired by then. But everyone else, in the top 10, top 15 is still going to be very relevant and be very tough matchups for either Aldo or McGregor moving up.
Oh, excuse me. Well, a couple things. I think that the featherweight division looks amazing right now. There's lots of good fights. And, in his question, he says, how long can we deal with title fights that we demand? Well, we've dealt with title fights that we don't demand, and they've still been pretty good. Like when Dillashaw filled in and fought Barao. I mean, look at how great that was. Joanna winning her, not knowing who that is. There'll be contenders that are coming up, but right now the featherweight division is great. I don't know how long some of those guys are going to stay around. Like Frankie, I don't know how long he intends to fight. I'm sure he's made tons of money. Faber the same way. How long is he going to chase a belt? But yeah, I think 45 and 55 look good for the long haul. Or the medium,
thanks for the question.
Medium haul.
Right. Our next question comes from Ryan D, and he writes in, how much should the UFC be worried about how fast and how big Bellator has become, and not to mention the rising popularity of World Series of Fighting and ONE FC? And let me be a little blunt here, Ryan. I don't think they have to worry about those organizations at all, to be quite honest. I think they're leaps and bounds ahead of those organizations, and if the UFC fails somehow, it's not because of Bellator or World Series of Fighting or ONE FC becoming better than them. It's because the UFC makes bad decisions and the UFC folds. That's the only way the UFC doesn't exist anymore. And I also go back to when the UFC was originally purchased from Zuffa. The Fertitas said, and I believe it was Frank, said, I see value in the 3 letters UFC. If Zuffa doesn't own the UFC, somebody will. There is value in those 3 letters now. So even if Zuffa somehow goes bankrupt or they no longer see it as a viable candidate, I think somebody will pick it up and someone will keep the name UFC. It may not always be run by the Fertitas, but I think there's always going to be a UFC. Now, that's not to say the UFC shouldn't watch Bellator or ONE FC or World Series of Fighting and keep an eye on them. I'm not saying they shouldn't do that, because that's just smart business. But I don't think that they're going to falter because of those organizations. They're going to falter because of something they did, not because of something Bellator or anybody else does.
Yeah. Jim, maybe I'm confused, and we appreciate the question from Ryan. I don't think Bellator. Like I wish that we could have Ryan on, because I when he says that how big Bellator is becoming, like I wonder how he classifies that, because is he saying that they're bigger because like they booked the the Shamrock Kimbo, they might sign Phil Davis, like is that what they mean by becoming bigger? Because it seems like the same old for Bellator minus the tournaments. It's starting to look a little bit like Strikeforce, like with the white colored mat. They're making some changes to, and it kind of looks like Strikeforce. But I think World Series of Fighting. I'm reading through his question. It says the popularity of World Series of Fighting and ONE FC. I think ONE FC would be more popular than the World Series of Fighting. The strange times and the strange station that the World Series of Fighting is on makes it hard to watch. And when you don't have compelling main events, and when you have main events fall out 2 shows in a row 3 days before the fight, I mean, it's hard to talk about an event like, Fighter A is fighting Fighter B, like this is going to be a great contest, and then some guy that's pushing carts at a grocery store gets promoted from the curtain jerker to the main event. I mean, that stuff doesn't happen in the UFC. That stuff doesn't happen in other organizations. So, yeah, the UFC will be around for a while.
All right. Well, ONE FC would be. Here's the thing. ONE FC is not popular here in the U.S. It'd be popular over in Asia. So by definition, you could say ONE FC is more popular than World Series of Fighting or Bellator, but that's in Asia, because none of those organizations, World Series of Fighting, Bellator, have, well, with the exception of going to Canada as an international destination, has not done an event overseas. And that's another reason why the UFC will be bigger. I mean, look at not even just the number of events, Dave, but look at where the UFC is having events. I mean, they just had an event for Poland, for gosh sakes. How far is it? How long is it until Bellator just even has a fight like in England?
Or Canada.
Well, they've had a fight in Canada, but I mean, that's what I mean. A country other than that's not North America. Not anytime soon. It's not, So, Yeah, but thanks for writing in though. I'm just saying I don't think they have to be really that worried about him. All right, Matt M writes in, will Chad Mendes ever beat Jose Aldo?
Yes.
Can he? Yes. Will he be given the opportunity to? I don't know. He's already lost twice in main events and has lost. The second time was a great fight. I was, on our award show last year, I picked for fight of the year. So he could compete with Jose Aldo, but I don't know if he's going to be given that third opportunity. So my answer will be yes, but no, because he won't fight him again.
Yes, I think Mendes will beat Aldo. Mendes is one of those guys, a lot like I'm thinking of guys like Michael Johnson, Max Holloway, and others. Every time you see them, they're vastly improved from the last time that you see them, and the people who argue that Miesha Tate should get a title shot, what has she done to deserve another title shot? Look at what Chad Mendes has done to try to get to his third title shot. Chad Mendes has gone out there and they give him somebody and he finishes them. I mean, there's a difference between, your winning fights and your finishing fights. Chad Mendes knows that he got beat by the champ twice and he wants another crack at him. But is he going to go out there and, limp through a couple of fights and then beg for it? No, he's going out there and he's finishing guys. And he finished Ricardo Lamas. Like, that's a big deal to finish somebody, like that. That's a top 3 guy in the world, 3-4 guy in the world. And he finished him. So I think Mendes will get his crack, and I think his third crack, and I think that he'll be successful.
But like we said earlier, there's a lot of stuff going on with the featherweight division. So if Aldo ends up moving up to 55, that could be a perfect time for Mendes to swoop in and be a title runner. So a lot will happen. Just I'm not sure how, the UFC's not as, they have booked matchups where one fighter is 0-2 against another fighter that has beat him twice. It does happen, but we haven't seen it for the title, though. That's the difference.
Right.
Now, if Aldo ends up not becoming champion and McGregor beats him, that's a more likely scenario to see a Mendes-Aldo 3, not for the title. But, again, he has to lose first, so we'll see. But, yeah, I think he can beat him if he is allowed to get another crack at him. All right, John S. writes in, which fighter from the early days, pre-UFC 40, would you like to see the benefits of modern training? There's actually a couple guys I'd like to see, not just from earlier UFC, but guys that fought the majority of their career in Pride, the prime of their career in Pride, and what that would have been like had their prime been in the UFC. And it would have been great to see Big Nog, Crow Cop. We talked about Crow Cop earlier. Vanderlei Silva, those guys in their prime, I think would have been great to see over in the UFC. As far as like an old guy UFC-wise, I think Royce Gracie's always an intriguing matchup. Could you imagine, Royce being 25 now instead of in like 1993? How would that would have played out? I think that would have been a very interesting guy. Also, I'd like to see, Josh Barnett, became heavyweight champion, really early, and then kind of, had some problems with performance-enhancing drugs. He kind of went overseas and did some things. I wonder if he would have stayed with the UFC, what that would have been like. And then 2 other guys, BJ Penn, after winning the welterweight title, he kind of left for a while before he came back. How many more great fights would he had in that 2-year span of his absence? That would have been nice. And then Jens Pulver left early after when he beat BJ Penn to win the lightweight title. I think it was actually he had one defense after that, but he left. He did some kickboxing and some other things before he kind of went over to Pride and whatnot. What would happen if he kind of would have stayed, because he was right in his prime when he left. So those are a couple guys that in terms of continuing their prime or kind of being a now, I would have liked to seen against some of the best of this kind of new generation here. For the UFC.
Yeah, I wrote it down. The way that I read the question was, I thought he was asking more about training, how they train nowadays. Where they got a nutritionist, they got a cardio guy.
Yeah. I mean, all those guys would benefit from that, of course, too.
Right. Well, one guy that I would like to see with all that would be Ken Shamrock. I wonder if he could. You imagine if he had a nutritionist and a guy working with his cardio. He was already pretty ripped and pretty powerful. And could you imagine if he went to American Top Team or Jackson Winklejohn as a young 22-year-old right now?
Right.
Could you imagine? He might fight at 55, maybe 7. I mean, he could fight anywhere, and he would be a machine. And I was watching UFC did a flashback to the Vitor Anderson fight, and you watch Vitor when he was 21 in those early UFCs. Could you imagine a young Vitor with the training that he has now?
He was already pretty scary back then too.
Yeah. But I mean, because I think when John was asking the questions, that's the kind of stuff. I mean, all the stuff that we're saying is good, but could you just imagine the training that say Darren Cruikshank does now compared to what Tank Abbott and Ken Shamrock are doing back then are completely different. Darren talked to us about having a special bed to help in his recovery, and they do these ice baths and all that kind of stuff. Did they do that back then? I'm not sure.
They really weren't cutting weight.
Yeah.
Because there weren't weight classes. So yeah, no, definitely. Ken Shamrock would be great because he's a guy I think that had more athletic talent than maybe anyone else in the early days. He was by far the best athlete.
He was the best athlete.
You add in technical skills, with maybe some more modern, refined strength and conditioning techniques. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. 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 I don't think they were doing a whole lot of those hammer things, the sledgehammer on the tire. They weren't doing a lot of those.
He might have been getting hit with a sledgehammer. I don't know. Ken Shamrock was a pretty tough dude back in the day.
No, that was during his WWE time.
Oh, that too. I mean, I heard that when his gym there, the Lion's Den, back in the day was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't surprise me if something crazy like his dad threw hammers at him or something like dodgeball. I mean, that was a pretty crazy place, but yeah, he would definitely be up there. Thanks for the question, John. Our next question, Hector C. We kind of already answered this, but you asked, does anyone besides Tate think she can actually beat Rousey? I think a lot of people think, just to answer you the specifics of the question, you said, does anyone think they can beat Rousey? I think everyone thinks they can beat Rousey. It's just they probably won't beat Rousey. There's a difference between thinking you're going to beat someone and actually being able to do it. Yeah. I think a lot of the women in the division think they can beat Ronda, but when they've been given the chance, they have not been even close to victorious, and that's there's a difference there.
Yeah. When he said it, it was it said, does anybody think that Tate can beat Rousey? That's how I read that.
Well, he said, does anyone besides Tate?
The way I read it was, does anybody besides Tate think that Misha can actually beat Ronda? No, I don't think anybody thinks that.
Well, I'm just saying everyone thinks they could beat Ronda. That's what I'm saying. You have to think you can beat her, because if you don't think you can beat her, then you've already been defeated before you stepped into the cage.
Absolutely.
Which may happen anyway. But what I'm saying is you have to think you can beat her. So, all right, let's move on. We got a couple more here. Michael J. If Edgar defeats Faber next month, who do you believe gets the winner of Aldo McGregor, or will they make him fight Mendez? I think I've said this a couple times since they announced the matchup. If Edgar wins, he gets the winner of Aldo McGregor. I think it has to happen. I mean, the way he dominated Cub Swanson, and at that point in time, I think Cub Swanson was ranked as the number one guy, and Edgar was 2 or 3. He dominated him and then finished him in the 5th round. So he could have gotten a title shot after that performance. But the UFC went ahead and booked the Aldo McGregor fight, so that left kind of Edgar out in the cold looking for an opponent. And Uriah Faber said, hey, I'll step up. I'll make a super fight. And he did. So if Edgar can beat Faber, I don't see any reason why he doesn't get the winner of Aldo and McGregor. Well, I really don't.
Here's the only way that it happens. If Aldo loses to McGregor and it's close, they're going to rematch, in which case I bet Frankie fights Mendez because he wants to get paid. That's the only way I see him not getting an immediate shot.
I hope not. I hope that isn't the case, but yeah, that could happen. But
I mean, Aldo's been on a 40-year run.
Right. Well, here's the thing. McGregor's win or lose, he's going to draw hype for a matchup. So to me, him against Aldo again or him against Edgar is still going to be a big event.
Yeah.
So if they're worried about pay-per-view buys, I don't think it matters who you put up against them. So that's why I'm hoping there's not an immediate rematch, because I don't think there's going to be any less sales for that matchup. So, but yeah, he should. He should. All right. Last question here. David K writes in, who would you like to see in a number one contenders bout for the 115 title? You know, the 115 division, and it really has changed now that Calderwood has lost, but there is not a clear-cut number one contender for this division. And, you know, we talked about when Joanna was going to fight again. Well, now that they booked a title fight for Fox, I'm not sure where her fight fits in the picture, and that may be a good thing, Dave, because I don't know who is the clear-cut number one contender. I mean, Jessica Penne has a fight coming up, but it's not anyone highly regarded. Tisha Torres, to me, is fighting someone beneath her in Angela Hill. You know, who knows what Esparza has in the future. We have the Fleas and Van Zant fight. There actually is a pretty good fight for 186. You have Daly against Brandon Marcos, but Aisling Daly missed weight her first fight in the UFC for the Ultimate Fighter finale. So I don't know, even if she beats Randa, I think because of that, she may get kind of punished for that. Obviously, Calderwood just lost against the Moroz, who we'll talk about. So I think she kind of factors in. I don't think she gets an immediate title shot, but she's now, you know, burst into the scene with a win here. So I don't know. They're going to have to make something. I'm thinking because of the upset, I think Moroz, maybe the winner of Feliz and Van Zant, like I said, Jessica Penne. But if I had to pick like if the UFC has to pick someone here in the next couple of weeks, I think if Jessica Penne wins, I think she is a very viable candidate. Former Invicta champion. She came very close to winning, you know, making the finals on the show. She had a pretty good performance, and she did beat Randa Marcos. So if I had to pick somebody, it'd be Jessica Penne. But I'm thinking maybe that Moroz against Penne winner, possibly. But like I said, it's really up in the air. There's not a clear-cut contender for Joanna's first title defense.
Yeah, there's a couple things. It goes back to, I realize that they want to be in a market where they can use their champion and be like, hey, you know, look, our first Chicago-born champion in Chicago. I get that, you know, that's what they want to do. But this is another one of those cases where it might be smart to just take a breath, let Joanna let her improve, sit out for just a little bit, and get a number one contender. Because there's, like you just listed off the fights that are getting ready to take place, which is great. I mean, don't forget about Rose Namajunas. You know, if she's victorious, you got that's an easy person to slide in for a shot. You know, she was just there recently at a title shot. So I know it's probably not the answer that you're looking for, but I would almost rather wait, kind of let the dust settle, and then see who's looked the best in their performance. And if nobody's earned it, then make them earn it.
Yeah, like I said, there's not a clear-cut contender. So, like I said, a couple fights, actually like 5 fights could happen before we're clear here. But what I will say though is Carla will not be the next. She will not get an immediate rematch. I can say that with 100% certainty. But everything else is really up in the air, because some of the matchups we mentioned, Dave, is someone you would consider in the top 10 fighting someone outside the top 10. And that's what kind of makes it frustrating. Like Penne is fighting a girl not in the top 10. Tisha Torres is fighting someone not in the top 10.
Rose Namajunas is fighting somebody not in the top 10.
Right. So that's what makes it hard, because it goes, okay, you beat this nobody. How does that, regardless of how that went, how does that justify then you getting a shot at the title? You know, there's a lot of depth in this division. There's not a need for someone to jump up to a title shot after beating a not ranked girl. That's what I'm trying. There's too much talent for there not to have more top girls fight each other in this division.
Yeah. Hey, that's the end of our questions, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Do you rank Moroz as number 9 in the strawweight division?
I don't know. We do our monthly rankings. We'll do them here in a couple weeks, but I think she's borderline top 10, and obviously I would drop Calderwood out of the top 10 with this loss.
Okay.
It's more because she lost in the first round, more so than the fact she lost. If she would have went out there and lost a close 15-minute decision, I think I can make a case for her sticking around. But getting submitted in the first round and not looking good, it's not like she was dominating. I got caught. She did not look good. We'll talk about it a little bit here. But, yeah, she's probably now outside the top 10, and Rose probably can get that 9-10 spot. And also I think the winner of Marcos and Daly probably creeps up there towards the bottom of the top 10, too, from their fight at 186.
Cool.
All right, well, as we mentioned, we'll pick the winners here. Our 3 favorite questions here. They were all good questions, but we had to pick 3, Dave, to win prize packs. And the winners will be randomly selected on their prize packs. To go over that, there's a signed photo by Paige Van Zandt. There's a kind of a mystery pack, which will include an autograph from Ricardo Lamas, and then another kind of mystery pack that will include an autograph from Jamie Varner. So those are the 3 prizes. But the winners are, we're going to go with Thomas B., Kyle F., and Brian R. Those are our 3 winners here for this month's contest. You'll be notified after the show. You have 24 hours to respond. And if you don't respond within the 24 hours, another entrant will be selected. So, but congrats, guys, and thanks for earning the contest.
Oh, wait.
All right,
I didn't mean to say a trombone.
And just in case people are wondering what their question for, Kyle had the question about Rousey and Anderson Silva. Let's see. Brian had the question on the featherweight division and whether Aldo and McGregor move up. And Thomas B had the question about Reebok. Just in case you guys are wondering. So, all right. Yeah. Thanks again for question. Thanks everybody who entered. We will be running, the fan Q&A has been working, but just do we might do a different contest next month. But we'll have, I believe 2 different prizes from fighters on the UFC Fight Night in Adelaide, Australia. To give you a hint, coming up. So we may do, we'll do something, I think that's May 9th, Dave, right?
I believe so. That is correct.
We'll do something kind of around that time period for our next giveaway. But we got some good autographs in from a couple fighters. So, yeah.
I'm actually looking at the card now so I can see who's on there to possibly win an autograph from.
So I don't want to give
eligible, right?
You're eligible?
Am I?
No.
What?
I don't think that's how it works, Dave.
Ooh, look at the names on this card.
Yeah. So there's some good names on there. So yeah, if you're not sure who's fighting on the Adelaide card, look it up and you'll see what maybe is there. All right. Well, before we get to, we got a couple of things here to run through. We're trying to wrap everything up here at our normal 90-minute show here. So we'll try to wrap everything up here. But let's get to Bellator 136 here real quickly, Dave. We had the title fight at 155 between Will Brooks and Dave Jansen, and that was I thought a pretty solid fight. But the thing you and I have kind of talked about, and more so a 3-round fight, but it definitely applied, I think, in this fight, Dave. Dave Jansen came out kind of on fire, and I thought was really throwing a lot of good combinations. But I think that early kind of burst of energy really sapped him for the remaining 20 minutes of this fight. And I think because of that, he wasn't able to have that same intensity that he did, whereas Will Brooks was able to kind of slowly but surely kind of ramp up his pace. And that, to me, was the difference in this fight. Why did I say Michael Page? Will Brooks has now kind of been used to amping up his performance. And even in his 3-round fights, you can kind of see him kind of steadily improve. And I think that's what you saw in this fight. Will Brooks has figured out kind of how to pace himself a little better. And I think Jansen, maybe it was the title fight, the main event. Will Brooks, I don't know, kind of maybe rushed it a little bit. And I think because of that, you could tell he was faded and really tired by that 5th round. And whereas Will Brooks was, at the same, if not just a slightly higher pace, in terms of output. And I think that really was the difference in that main event.
Yeah. During that fight, I thought that Jansen came out and he was throwing, like you said, he was throwing combinations. He was throwing spinning kicks and the whole 9 yards. But it just seemed like Will Brooks was able to just, just move out of the way. Like, he was the more athletic fighter. And, I guess it's a good ploy if you're Jansen, try to finish it early when you're the freshest and then kind of hang on for the ride and hope you can land something, submission, whatever it is. But, Will Brooks is another one of those guys I put in the same kind of breath as like those Michael Johnsons and those other guys where we seem to see a better and better Will Brooks every time he fights.
All right, a couple other fights on the card. You had Tony Johnson against Alexander Volkov was the first fight of the night. I thought a very, gritty performance by Tony Johnson taking out Alexander Volkov in a split decision. I think for Volkov, hopefully, Dave, he can move down to 205. We've been saying this pretty much since he came to Bellator. He is a 205-pounder and should be fighting there. And I hope losing to a big, strong wrestler like this Tony Johnson may push Volkov in that direction. Because I think with some of could you imagine him against Liam McGarry? How cool would that be? Two, tall, lanky guys like that with explosive power. I just think he's built for 205, and I hope losing against a big, strong guy like Johnson may rethink his decision. Speaking of beating big, strong guys, Mastin Held, not a big 155er by any stretch, whereas I say Tiger Sarnovsky would be, and he was able to pretty much manhandle the Russian and submit him there in the 3rd round with a knee bar. And I think with the exception of that Pitbull fight, Dave, he impresses just about in every fight. It's incredible. And, he beats another top guy for Bellator, uses another leg or ankle hold. I mean, for a guy that probably, again, should be fighting at 145 pounds, he's doing pretty solid here at 155. It seems like every fight, he's the underdog, he's the smaller guy, and he's been able to pull out victories and does it in dramatic fashion.
Yeah, that's 2 weeks in a row that we've seen screams in the cage from leg locks. That's interesting.
And from Bellator.
Yeah. The Tony Johnson guy, that's the 2nd former heavyweight champ that he beat. I thought I read somewhere, did he beat Josh Barnett?
Let me look at that, but continue on with your point here.
I think that is accurate.
He beat Tim Sylvia at 1FC. That's a former heavyweight champion. And he also has a win over, I believe he's now in the UFC, Derek Lewis. He also has a win over Derek Lewis as well. His only 2 losses, one of them are to Daniel Cormier.
Yeah.
But he's a pretty solid competitor.
Yeah, he needs to get out of that division. Volkov needs to get out of that division. He's definitely a 205er. And, there's no reason for Bellator to have a heavyweight division. We've said this before. And, there's just really not a reason to have it. I'd rather have the 205 division for Bellator. But, the other thing I saw was Sarnovsky just got manhandled in that fight. I didn't think he was in it at any point throughout that fight.
Yeah, and like I said, that's incredible for him being, the bigger guy in that matchup. So big ups to Mastin Held. And then the jiu-jitsu practitioner Carvalho there kind of stifled Joe Schilling a little bit. I know the fans wanted to see him kind of go out there and bang, and Carvalho's like, yeah, I'm going to stand out there and bang, but he really wasn't going to because Joe Schilling's pretty nasty. So that was a fun fight, but it shows that Joe Schilling still has a lot of work to be done with his grappling. It was good defensively. He didn't allow Carvalho to really get deep on any submissions or really threaten him with damage from the top. It was good from that, but in terms of being able to get back up to your feet quickly to keep that good striking in play, he still has to learn on that front.
Yeah, you're a devastating striker, but this isn't the mixed martial striking. It's it's not just a striking fight. So he's gotta learn, and he'll learn from this loss.
All right, World Series of Fighting 20, as you mentioned, Dave, they kind of had their main event fall out there, Hani Marks against David Branch. Instead, as you mentioned, one of the guys on the undercard, Jesse McElligott, came up to fight David Branch, and just Branch way better than this guy, submitted him in the second round. Nick Newell fought Joe Condon, and Newell surprisingly did a lot more stand-up in this matchup, and it was decent, but I still think he needed to go back more to his roots in that one. But it was a good bounce back win for him. Unfortunately, the man known as Phoenix Jones, aka Ben Fodor, the superhero there in Seattle, he lost the unanimous decision to Emmanuel Wallo, and Wallo didn't really do much other than take him down and kind of hold him there. Fodor was definitely doing the more damage of the two, but really, besides that third round where both guys were kind of tired and he was throwing a lot of stuff, that was the only round I would have gave for Ben Fodor. I still think the guy has a bright future. I think he's only 25 years old, but obviously has to kind of work on the getting back up quicker, kind of like we mentioned with Joe Schilling, because that was a fight where he definitely was doing more to win that fight than Wallo was.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up your point with I will give the World Series of Fighting a B/+ for that card. It didn't have my attention. I was home, and it didn't have my attention while I was watching it. I DVR'd it and I went back and watched it, but there just wasn't a whole lot of compelling stuff going on. The fights that did happen were good. They were, nothing great, but the guy that they have backstage, when they say, Hani Marks is off the card, but that's an amazing opportunity for this fella, and he's back there shadowboxing. Dude, I just heard that 2 weeks ago. Like in their tournament, and it's something that the World Series of Fighting they can't help, but there was no way that Branch was losing that fight, and kind of disappointed.
Yeah, and then it ended in a knockout, but I wasn't really impressed with their matchup at heavyweight. And when I was watching that heavyweight match, and the reason I'm saying this quotation, those are probably two of the shortest heavyweights I've ever seen. Yeah, they both are listed at about 6 foot. And if you're 6 foot, I don't know. There's very few guys heavyweights that are that tall that have been successful. I mean, Pat Barry was 5'10". Look how that worked out for him. I mean, devastating striker, but he's just too small. Doesn't matter if you actually weigh 260. You're still only 6 foot. I mean, you're just too small for those divisions. So, while Stephen Mako got it, a nice knockout, it wasn't like there's really a bright future there. But right. Yeah, so that was World Series of Fighting 20. Like you said, solid card. I think Bellator was a little better, but for World Series of Fighting, for them once again, kind of unfortunately, they had to have a guy drop out, and I think the Marks Branch fight would have been a lot better and could have really elevated that card. But
I agree.
Injuries happen. All right, let's get to UFC Poland in Krakow, Poland. Last Saturday on the Fight Pass, 4 fights were shown on the main part of the streaming card. First fight, as we mentioned, Marina Moroz against Joanne Calderwood, and just what an upset for the 5-0 undefeated Ukrainian, making her UFC debut against the 6th ranked and also undefeated Joanne Calderwood. And Dave, this kind of goes back to when JoJo lost on the show to Rose Namajunas. She does not handle pressure well. If you pressure her with strikes, you can kind of get to her and get her out of her rhythm. And that's exactly what Moroz did. She came in with strikes, pressured her, got in close, kind of scrambled to a drop down. She went for an armbar, and she got it. That's almost exactly how Rose beat her. And that's now the blueprint. That's how you have to beat Joanne Calderwood. She hasn't figured out how to handle pressure, circle around it, or combat with great clinch work. But you stand a little bit at range in a slower pace, she's going to pick you apart. If you let her settle into her rhythm, she can beat you. But if you get her off that rhythm early, like in this case against Moroz, you have a chance to beat her, and that's what happened on Saturday.
Yeah, a couple things I took away. Joanne Calderwood did not look like she was ready to fight when she was standing in the cage getting announced. She looked like she was nervous, afraid, scared, had other things on her mind. She didn't look ready to go. Her opponent came in, took full advantage of the opportunity that was presented to her, and now's got a legitimate concern, not a legitimate argument that she should be, top 7, top 8 in the division. You finish one of the top girls in less than a round. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, definitely. She's now on the rise, and like I said, dashes hopes of Calderwood getting a title shot, which could have been probable. I don't know if it would have, but could have been. Next fight was at welterweight as Sheldon Westcott took on Pawalik. It kind of reminded me, going back to World Series of Fighting, kind of reminded me of that Fodor Wild fight where Westcott in this case was just trying his best to get on top and land damage. And I think he was doing it kind of recklessly, Dave, and I think he was expending a lot of energy and takedowns that at times I don't think he was going to get at that particular time instead of readjusting. And when it came to striking, he was really not showing a lot of technique. And I think by the second round, I think he kind of maybe wore himself out and just kind of was too desperate for the takedown. And I think Pawalik kind of sensed that and realized, all right, if this is all this guy's going to throw, I can probably land some good combinations. And he did. And I think did a really good job starting in the second round, ending through the third. And I think kind of, staying fresher and landing more damage and keeping Westcott off of him, that was able to get him the victory there in his home country.
Yeah, pretty good performance for Pawlik. And, I thought that there was going to be – I thought we were going to see a lot more out of Sheldon Westcott. What is that for him now? Is he won?
That was his second fight in the UFC.
And he won his last one?
No, he lost the finale fight to Theodorou. Yeah,
it just kind of goes to show you – I couldn't remember the finale fight. Kind of goes to show you that there's a difference between the level of fighters that's on the Ultimate Fighter and the level of fighters once you're in the UFC. I thought we would see a whole lot more from Sheldon Westcott. Kind of bummed out about it.
It still looked like a guy that's very raw and is going more on kind of more aggression and strength than skill and technique.
Yes, he needs to harness his inner Hoist Gracie.
I still think he has a future in the UFC, but I think he just kind of has to work on, tighten things up a little bit. All right, the next fight of the evening, the co-main event at light heavyweight, Jimmy Manuwa against Jan Blachowicz. Not very impressed with this fight either, and Jimmy Manuwa definitely got the win, Dave, but this was not the Jimmy Manuwa you remember before the Gustafsson fight, really even in the Gustafsson fight. It just didn't really seem like he had that killer instinct. It didn't seem like he was throwing as many combinations as he could have. And for Blachowicz, that's pretty much how he fights. I don't think his performance was really any different than what we've seen in previous fights. It's just one of those kicks or punches didn't lead to a knockout. I think that's kind of the pace he likes to fight. But for Manuwa, it just didn't seem like he was all there. I don't know if it was the travel, because they mentioned it was the first time in the UFC he had not fought in his home country of England. So I don't know, even though flying to Poland's not that far, but I don't know if that had anything to do with it. Maybe he had a difficult weight cut. I don't know, but he did not look like the same guy that had been knocking, full silly, about a year ago. And he was off for a year. It just wasn't the same guy. It was off. I mean, it was good enough to get a win, but it wouldn't have been good enough had he fought someone better than Blachowicz. Yeah.
You never know when it comes to that travel. You really never know what's going to happen. I think the easiest way to describe that fight, Jim, is exactly what the announcer said. Jimmy Manuwa was able to hold on to his number 9 ranking. That's pretty much what happened. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, he played it safe, and like I said, he got the victory, but not very impressed.
Mm-hmm.
A guy I would like to see him take on, though, and that's if he's victorious this weekend on the undercard against Patrick Cummings, but I'd like to see an OSP Jimmy Manuel fight.
Wasn't that scheduled?
I don't know, but I'd like to see it regardless. But obviously, I think OSP would have to win this weekend against Cummings. So, all right, let's get to the main event. Crow Cop Gonzaga 2. We kind of talked about Crow Cop already. Thought he may retire, win or lose, but honestly, Dave, Crow Cop really didn't fight all that great. If you really go back and look, in the first 2 rounds, he got outstruck 15-5 and then 29-1 in the first 2 rounds as he got taken down twice, was pretty much just holding defensively. He wasn't doing much to get back up to his feet. It was pretty much holding on and just trying to stifle Gonzaga to the point where the referee would come and stand it up. That was pretty much his strategy if he got taken down. And against better heavyweights, that would not have been a great strategy, I don't think. But then in the 3rd round, he was able to catch, while clinching, he was able to catch Gonzaga with an elbow, and that kind of led to the beginning of the end, and Crow Cop was able to finish it. But up until that point, Dave, he was losing this fight and losing pretty handily. So that's what kind of, I'm not really sure how bright of a future he has. I mean, he got the win, but if he has to, I guess, fight other strikers now, because it is proven if he's fighting anyone with a discernible ground game, he's going to lose. And that's why some of the guys I mentioned, earlier are more prone to stand up, and that's kind of his future. Because Gonzaga, obviously, he's towards the end of his career too, but he was not looking good. And someone with a little more power, and I think even a better top game would have beaten him easily and would have finished him probably by that point.
Mm-hmm. No, like the question that we got earlier, like who's next for Crow Cop? Let's be real. He's not anywhere near a title shot. It's kind of like a swan song, like a farewell tour. They're going to match him up against somebody to where both of their stand-up skill sets will be on display. He got dominated for 2 rounds. I'm not going to say it's a lucky elbow, because that was a devastating elbow that he landed on Gonzaga, and took full advantage of it. I mean, once he got into that dominant position, he could have beat anybody from the position he was in with those elbows. He could have knocked out Kane with those. Yeah,
I mean, and when a guy's been fighting as long as he has that many knockouts, it's hard to say he got a lucky knockout. I would say he's lucky to get the win, not lucky to get the knockout, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because he had to get the knockout to win. The way it was going, he wasn't going to somehow pull out a decision in the next 15 minutes and win 3 rounds.
Yeah, I don't think they could have stood up for another 3 rounds.
Right. Yeah, he probably would have got finished if it continued like that. But he got the win, and like we said, we'll see. I don't think he has that many more fights. 3 at most.
Right. Hey, real quick, we're headed to New Jersey, right?
Yes, sir.
Hey, I got a tweet just now from Ariel Hawani. I wanted to get your thoughts. Benson Henderson versus Michael Johnson, targeted for TUF 21 finale in Florida. What do you think of that? I'm a fan of that.
I like it. I'm just saying it would have been cool if they would have actually got a Black Zillion against an American Top Team member.
Yeah.
How cool would it have been to have Michael Johnson against Dustin Poirier? Both Black Zillion American Top Team. Or, boy, I'm kind of scratching my noggin here, but I know another matchup that could have been made to have as the main event, but that is a good one though. That would have been a cool one to have, but that's just. Or what about Tyron Woodley's with American Top Team too? Dang it, I was going to say Tyron Woodley against Thiago Alves, but I think Woodley's now with Top Team.
I think it makes sense from the point of view that it's what's best for the division, and it's not one of those fights that you scratch your head and like, oh, why They're making it because both of them want. If Michael Johnson beats Ben Henderson, I mean, you can talk about him getting a top 3 guy next.
Right. And obviously Benson's moving back down to 155.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm just saying it would have been cool for the theme of the show. At least it is a black zillion, though.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to say that someone like a Dustin Poirier that I mentioned or a Tyron Woodley, someone from American Top Team, won't have another big fight on there, which I think will be the case. I'm just saying that would have been cool in terms of the theory of the show.
Cool.
So I do like it. All right, well, let's get to UFC on Fox 15. I will be heading out Friday morning to Newark.
You driving?
No, I'm flying. That would have been a 9.5 hour drive from my house. No, sir.
Will you get to see the weigh-ins?
Yep, I'll be. I think the weigh-ins aren't until like 4 or 5 in the afternoon. I'll have been there several hours.
You should do a lot of stuff like this at the weigh-ins. Hey, I'm Jim Graham, and I'm at the weigh-ins. Woo!
Yeah, I'll probably do something like that. Follow me on Twitter for those updates there.
No, don't follow Jim on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter because Jim has like 8 million followers.
8? Okay, you're overstating your bounds here.
It must be because of your nerdy good look. What did Steve say?
My nerdy good looks. That's probably why, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't wrong though. He was right. I do have those. That's what I'm going for. All right. First fight of the evening, women's strawweight division, Paige Van Zandt against Felice Herrig. Both of these fighters are 1-0 in the UFC. Van Zandt is coming off a victory at UFC Fight Night Austin over Kylan Curran, knocking her out in the 3rd round. And Felice Herrig is coming off a 2nd round submission victory over Lisa Ellis at the Tough 20 finale. Obviously, Felice way more experienced in her career. I believe 10-5, right? Am I right on that? 10-5 in her career. Van Zandt is just 3-1.
The UFC has 10-5 for Felice, 4-1 for Paige.
4-1. Okay, I missed that. She was 3-1 entering the current fight. That's right. All right, so I was right on Felice. I see this playing out on the feet. Van Zandt showed a little bit of a ground game in her fight against Curran. I think that's going to be a little tougher to take down Felice, and when it does, I think Felice in her last fight, and I think the last couple of years has shown a more improving submission game. But I still think at her core, she is a Muay Thai fighter. And I think that's probably Paige's still biggest asset is her striking as well. So I really see it playing out on the feet. But I think the difference may be if it does go to the ground, I think Felice's submission game is better than Paige's. And I think that may be the difference is if it does hit the ground, I think Felice is more comfortable off her back than Paige's. I think it's a real tough matchup to pick, and even with the vast experience with Felice, I think even though this girl is only 4-1, I think she does have a chance to beat her.
Yeah. Let's not forget that Felice has been around forever in combat sports. Obviously, this is the brightest lights that Felice Herrig has ever been under. With that being said, those lights are going to be just as bright for Paige Van Zandt. There's a lot of media obligations that they've been doing leading up to this fight. I already saw a picture of Felice on Good Morning New York or something with Paige. So there's a lot of those little things that are there. Stylistically, I think Felice is just a little bit better all around. And I think that has a lot to do with just the fact that she has 3 times as many fights inside of some sort of fenced-in structure. And, I think it's a great fight to kick off what is it on? Fox Sports 1? No, Fox. To kick off the main Fox card. I think it's a great fight. And before we move on, don't forget, dude, the people listening, you got to check out the Fox prelim card. Man, the whole card is stacked. This is one.
It's a good prelim card, yeah. Highlighted by Jim Miller against Beneil Dariush, but like I mentioned, OSP is fighting Patrick Cummins. That's a good fight at 205 as well. So there's some good undercards. So I think I picked a good one to go and see in person, I think.
Corey Anderson just won for the greatest nickname ever. His nickname is Beastin 25-8.
Yeah, I forgot. Ultimate Fighter winner. Actually, 2 Ultimate Fighter winners. Corey Anderson and Eddie Truck Gordon are both on the undercard.
Did you see his nickname?
Yeah,
Instead of 24/7, 25/8. Beyond
Yeah.
the Cage, greatest show. We're always around 24/7. No, 25/8, 366.
I'd say more like 23/6.
Because of the time difference.
One day and 1 hour shorter. Just, we got to have a day off, right? I mean,
it's because of the time difference.
Right, that's
between your side of the studio and my side of the studio.
Right. All right, Cub Swanson against Max Holloway. 145 is our next fight. Most places have Cub Swanson as the underdog, believe it or not. And regardless of how Swanson's last fight went, Holloway's never fought someone as highly ranked as Swanson. Swanson was on the cusp of a title shot, had won, I believe, 7 fights in a row, had a great main event performance against Jeremy Stevens, and then, had the disappointing performance against Frankie Edgar. But again, let's not forget, that was Frankie Edgar. He didn't lose a fight. He didn't get finished in the 5th round by some bum. We're talking about a former world champion here. So I think people are really downgrading Swanson for that loss more than they should. I think had he lost like that to Jeremy Stevens, Dave, yeah, you picked Max Holloway as the favorite. But I think Cub Swanson's just as game as ever, and I think it's going to be a very intriguing fight, a very close fight. But I don't get me wrong, we're huge fans of Max Holloway. We really think he has a bright future. I think we mentioned he's 23 years old. He already has like 8 fights in the UFC. He's finished his last couple. He's on a 4-fight winning streak. He's kind of the hot prospect here in the UFC. He's really surged since losing to Conor McGregor about 2 years ago. So he definitely has a chance to win. But like you mentioned, bright lights. This is the first time he's really had a huge high-profile fight. Swanson's already main evented 2 Fight Night cards. This is nothing new to him. But it should be a fun fight. And the winner, if Holloway wins, he's on, he's maybe only 1 or 2 fights away from a title shot. And if Swanson wins, I think he's right back in there. Like I said, if he beat Frankie, he was going to get a title shot. He lost that fight, but if he beats Swanson, he's right back in there. Or if he beats Holloway, he's right back in there, I should say.
Am I missing something? Are these guys, neither one of these guys is currently ranked?
They should both be in the top 10.
Yeah, maybe
I don't know how Swanson goes from 1 to not being in the top 10 with after losing 1 fight.
I'm just looking at the UFC's page, and neither one of them have the numbers next to them. No, okay. I think this is a great fight. I think you brought up some excellent points. If the bright lights are going to bother Paige Van Zandt, then I'm anxious to see what's going to happen to Holloway. This is clearly the biggest fight, the biggest spotlight that he's been on, and a win is going to do so much for him if he's able to pull out the victory. We know what Cub Swanson's going to bring. Cub Swanson's ready. He's ready to roll. He's ready to get back in there. He wants a title shot. He's going to do everything in his power to get past Holloway. But Holloway might not beat everybody in the division, but he's definitely a tricky fight for anybody.
The co-main event of the evening, Chris Camuzzi against Jacare Souza for the second time. Obviously, this matchup loses some of its luster considering Yoel Romero is no longer in that spot opposite Jacare, where along with the main event, the winner can very likely get a shot at the middleweight title. I think to not punish Jacare, Dave, I think if he wins, his title hopes I still think can happen because it's not his fault. Romero dropped out. I don't think I'll put it this way. Unless he has a horrible performance and wins, that's the only way he really doesn't get a title shot, or at least really doesn't factor in. He still may have had to have another fight after Romero anyway, but I'm saying that the UFC shouldn't kind of punish him. It wasn't his fault for Romero dropping out. And I think as long as he goes out there and does his normal thing, which is just out grappling anybody on the planet, there's no reason he can't submit Chris Camuzzi again. I give Camuzzi all the credit in the world for stepping up and take this matchup, but he does not have much of a chance against Jacare, and I think we're going to see an impressive submission, and I think we're going to see some gator clapping at the end of this one. I mean, that's giving my pick away, but There's Camus. I put it this way. Camusi is a tough guy, and he's made it very far in a sport where, to be honest, he's not really athletically talented. He has gotten here through hard work and sheer determination, but he just doesn't have the skill set some of these other guys have in the middleweight division, and Jacare is one of those guys.
Yeah, this is Jacare all the way. Chris Camozzi, good on you for stepping up and taking one for the UFC. Probably got a nice little paycheck slipped under his hotel room door. It's a great opportunity. Lots of other people have, took these short notice fights and come out victorious. I just think that him going to the gym and training every day and, teaching kids jiu-jitsu or whatever he does, for training, you can't just jump into the cage with Jacare. I just think he's just way too well-rounded. And I think, this is all Jacare. Giving my pick away.
Of the evening, former UFC light heavyweight champion Lyoto the Dragon Machida takes on former Strikeforce middleweight champion Luke Rockhold. I think this is a very intriguing matchup. I think Luke Rockhold, because of his length and his height, I think does present problems for Machida, who is known for kind of being able to get into the pocket and come out. And he's usually able to do that relatively unscathed. Now, because of the length of Rockhold, he may actually be able to kind of compensate for Machida's quick movement in and out because of his length. And I think he's proved really since his Vitor loss that he has great finishing ability, as he's finished, I believe, 2 guys since then, and one of them being Michael Bisping by submission. This is a closer fight than maybe, if you would have had Rockhold fight someone like Machida right after Strikeforce, I probably would have said Rockhold probably doesn't have a chance. But now that he's had a few fights, in the UFC, and I think he's steadily improved, I think it's a lot closer fight. But again, the difference to me will be how, regardless of the length, Dave, is how he will deal with the movement of Machida, his karate style, and will his length be enough, or will he be able to catch up with them and figure Machida out? Because most people that fight Machida haven't been able to kind of figure that out, and that's going to be the interesting thing. And also, because Machida is such a hard guy to catch, his fights usually typically go longer unless he's on the end of the knockout. Luke Rockhold, despite having several championship and main event fights scheduled, he hasn't been past, I think, the 3rd round in his career. So that's something you got to factor in. Machida's been to 25 minutes several times in his career, and if it goes into those championship rounds, how will Luke Rockhold handle that? And I think that's also a big question mark in this matchup as well.
Yeah, I'm efforting what you just said about he beat Kennedy in a 5-round fight, and then he beat Jacare in a 5-round fight. That's it.
That's right. Those are the only 2. But if you look at all his other fights, they've all ended in the 1st or 2nd round.
Yeah.
Now,
it's been
obviously in that Kennedy fight, was 3 years ago.
Yeah. No, I think the problem that a lot of people run into with Lyoto Machida is the fact that, like you said, the style that he has is tricky, and it takes him getting used to. By the time you get used to it, it's halfway through the 2nd round, and you're already down a round, and then you're like, oh shoot, I got to win this round. And when you charge in, that's when mistakes happen, and that's when Lyoto Machida, that's when the dragon pounces, and I think Luke Rockhold has the ability to beat Lyoto Machida, but anytime that you're going to beat Lyoto Machida, it has to be almost a perfect fight. And, how long can Luke Rockhold be perfect? Can he do it for 25 minutes? That's what he's going to have to do, I think.
All right, well, with that said, Dave, let's get to picks for UFC on Fox 15. First fight of the evening in the strawweight division, Paige Van Zandt against Felice Herrig. Close matchup, but I think I'm going to go with the experience here, and I also like the fact that I think she has a better submission game, so give me the little bulldog, Felice Herrig, to win this one.
Yeah, I'm going to take Felice.
Cub Swanson against Max Holloway. I really like both guys. I think it's going to be a close fight, but I think for whatever reason, I think people are forgetting the Cub Swanson prior to the Frankie Edgar fight. It's like he loses once and he's completely forgotten his great win streak he was on before that. So I'm going to go with Cub Swanson and get a bounce back win here.
Yeah, I am going to disagree, and I'm going to go with the young phenom in Max Holloway.
Well, we already said our pick, but Jacare. And even if it was still Romero, my pick would have been Jacare because I love Jacare. So, yeah, give me Jacare.
Yep, Jacare.
It's also because I like saying Jacare. That's also half the reason I like him. All right. Main event time. Lyoto Machida against Luke Rockhold. Close fight. A tough fight. I think it's going to be a good one, but I got to go with Machida. He's one of those guys, Dave, that it's really hard for someone, to really figure them out and truly like get to him. And to me, the only guy that has really like gotten to him is Shogun. And yeah, I know John Jones finished him, but I think John Jones was losing that fight up until that scramble in the clinch and the kind of that neck crank thing. The Shogun fights plural, were the only fights I really saw someone kind of figure that style out, and I don't think Rockhold can emulate that style. So give me the Dragon.
Yeah, like you always say about the champions, it's hard to pick against them. Just kind of go with the champ until it happens, and I feel the same way about the Dragon. I think that he can beat everybody within the division. I think his trickiest fight is Weidman, and we've already seen how that goes. But I'm definitely going to pick the Dragon.
All right. Any final thoughts here before we end the show, Dave?
Yeah, man. Safe travels on the trip. Take some pictures with some people. I'm sure there'll be people all over the place. And, yeah, man. Have fun.
Well, I am looking forward to it. I've never been to New Jersey before, so that should be fun. And I'm going with one of our listeners here of the show, Billy Brandt. So shout out to Billy. I think he's listening today, so I'll be going with him. So we'll have a lot of fun. And yeah, looking forward to it. It's been, I hate to say be conceited, but it's only been 5 months, but since I went to Vegas, but it feels like it's been a while since I got to go see a UFC fight in person, and it's a new destination I've never been to before, and I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully my decision to lay down some coin on travel and tickets pays off here.
Is it at the Prudential Center?
Yes, it is.
It's cool. I like the way that they do things over there, because you'll see Giant Stadium is right there, and what do they call them? The Red Bulls or whatever. There's
right.
There's 3 stadiums, and like the guy who had to make the parking lines in the parking lot is probably dead, because there's so many parking spots. It's the biggest parking lot you've ever seen.
Well, that's another reason I decided to go, brand new arena. I figured that place has got to be a great place to watch an event. If it was the old, Meadowlands,
the Rock, you mean?
Yeah, I think a guy ended up renamed the Izod Center.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not as likely, but yeah, looking forward to it. So again, follow me on Twitter at Jim Gramm for my tweets and stuff during the event and everything, and my weekend there in New Jersey. And I'll probably post some stuff on our Facebook page as well. So for the Juice Dave Sadler, you can follow him on Twitter at Vigilante Juice. I'm your host, Jim Gramm, and thanks for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast.